Hello everyone and welcome back to Web and Apps with Edith. Today we'll be learning about HTML form creation. Today's video is all about creation of HTML forms. What are forms? Form is an area that contains the form element. Means whenever we try to register for an email ID or we try to fill a form, we very well know that a form is a page where there are some text boxes, some buttons, some data which is there onto the screen, and we need to enter some values over there. So this form is an area that contains the form element. Form elements is used to collect user input. Form takes in user input, whatever we are entering, that's the value it takes in. A form is defined with the form tag. So in our body tag, we'll be writing form tag, and inside form tag, there will be multiples of another tags that will help us to create a form in the user input format. The most used form tag is the input tag. So we'll be writing form tag followed by the input tag. There are a lot of attributes that follow with the tag, and there are types that we need to mention for what type of input you are trying to write. So seeing all the input tags, type and attributes in the ahead slide as well. The type of input is specified by the type attribute tag with the input tag. So the type will define what type of input you want, whether you want a text box, whether you want a radio button, whether you want a checkbox, etc. All depends with the type that you want it to be mentioned. So what are input elements? Input elements can be displayed in many ways depending on the type of attribute. So we write input, that's the format, type is equal to what exactly we want an input to be seen onto the page. So if we write input type is equal to text, it will display a text box onto the screen. And we have more attributes with it. We'll be learning one by one. So with input type, you have the syntax as input type is equal to whatever is the type that you want to mention. That is what you need to write on that blank space. So they take various number of inputs, and each input field must have a name attribute as well, because the name attribute is what will help us to capture the value that we are trying to pass. If the name attribute is omitted, the value of the input field will not be captured to be validated. So when we go on to the further validations, like where we get JavaScript into the picture to validate, it needs to capture those values in that specific text boxes or radio buttons. So that's the reason we need to give a name for it. Form input type is equal to text displays a single line text input field. So it will be like a text box that will be displayed onto the screen. When input type is equal to radio, it displays a radio button. So button is displayed with a circle where we can select a particular value that we want. So that's a radio button. Input type is a checkbox which displays a checkbox, and you can tick it so that you come to know that there is anything that you have checked. So it displays a checkbox for selecting 0 or more of many choices. Here in radio button, you can select only one from the given radio buttons, while in checkbox you can select more than one. Input type is equal to submit displays a submit button for the page to be submitted. You will have a button with the name on it as submit. So that is the use of a submit button. Or we can give input type is equal to button. So it will display a clickable button. In this, a button will be displayed, but there will be no text. You need to give what value you want to display on it. But for submit button, it will come with the name submit onto the button itself, and it's already known that it has to submit something. That's the reason we give it as type is equal to submit. Further into the form attributes, form attribute have an action attribute. So with the form tag, you will be writing action. defines the action to be performed when the form is submitted. Form data is sent to a file on the server. When the user click on it, the submit button. So you will have a form tag. With the form tag, you will have action, and you will mention the page that it has to be done. So form action equal to the data that you want to process. So that action will be performed. So if you click say form action is equal to a.html. So on the click of submit button, it has to navigate to a.html file and some action will be performed. Example on the same. Form action equal to action page.php. So I am saying on the click of input button, my action page will go to the action page.php file. So my page, which is a PHP file, will be loaded when I click on the submit button. So I've given input type is equal. Form tag is a container tag. So we need to close the form tag as well. While the input tag is a standalone tag. So we just need to mention input type is equal to. Now for input, it has an attribute which is called as type. There's an attribute which is called as value. And there's an attribute which is called as name as well. Plus you can even also give an ID. So you can see ID, name, value. These are the few attributes, form attribute. So let's see what are the form elements. Form element can contain one or more of the following form element. It means that you can have more than one input type inside the form tag. So you will have input, you will have label, you have select, option, text area, button. Now input we very well know. We come to know that whatever we want to input onto the form, it could be text box, radio button, checkbox, etc. We need to write an input over there. Label is something which is similar to any text written in HTML. As we know, whatever we write inside the body, it will be displayed as it is onto the screen, onto the browser page. So we don't need to even mention label, we can just write it. But labels are useful in form creation because you need to pick the value of the label. So in that case, you need to give a name. That's why you write it as label. Select, as the tag itself says select. So it will be display helping us to select a lot of data. So this will be used as a drop down list. This will be used for a drop down list or normal list selection first to give us the option. Now with select, we can give option as data. That means select tag, and we can mention as multiple or nothing. So if we just give select and we give, then it will show you a drop down list. But when you say select and multiple, it will show you a list format where you can select more than one in the list. While it's a drop down, then you can select only one. Select tag is accompanied by an option tag. So whatever values it should show in the drop down list or in the list has to come with the option tag. Like in the unordered list and in the ordered list, we were starting the tag as OL and then we were mentioning LI and the data that you want. So LI stands for list item. Over here we are having select tag, and inside the select tag we have an option tag. So inside select we'll be having option and we'll be mentioning all the options that the drop down list and the list should display. Next is a text area. It is similar to the text itself, but it will be a bigger size. By default it's a size of 3 rows and some 14 characters that you can insert. But if you want more, then you can give a height and a width for the text area. So it will show you how much. And there it will be some lines over here. So it says you can enlarge and decrease as well. So that's the text area. So you can give a height and a width for it to display. Like right now if I've given 4 rows. So if I give a height of that much, it will display me 4 rows. But as my data that I'm trying to enter increases, scroll bar will appear over here so that I can scroll and check. While for the normal text box, this option is not available. It will be a small text with a limited length of it and you can enter only that much value. But for the text area, you can put in as many values as you want and it will be easily readable for us as well. Then you have input type is equal to button that helps you to display a button onto it. Let's see one by one in more deep. So we start with label element. Label element defines a label for several form elements. The label element is used for screen reader users because the screen reader will read out loud the label when the user focuses on the input element. This is meant as when he has to capture what are the information that has gone into the input and everywhere. So to find those values for each data what it is coming, it goes inside the label. The label element also help user who have difficulty clicking on very small regions such as radio buttons or checkboxes because when the user clicks the text will be toggling. So in the label element you can put a radio button and put a label next to it as male or a female. So even when it clicks on the radio button it understands which radio button it has selected. So that's how you can put a label also next to the radio button as well. The for attribute of the label tag should be equal to the ID attribute of the input element to bind them together. This is the select element. The select element defines a drop-down list. As I already showed you, select element defines a drop-down list. The option element defines an option that can be selected. By default, the first term in the drop-down list is selected. To define a pre-selected option, add the selected attribute to the option. So we write it as option value, whatever is the value selected, fiat option. So when you have a drop-down list like this, you click on it, it will show you a list. In that, by default over your fiat will be there because it has given you what's selected. So that will be already shown over there as selected. So this is how you enter a value in the drop down list. So size attribute to specify the number of visible values. So when you mention the size and you say how many values to be displayed, that many. So as I said, if you mention it like this, it will show you a drop down list where only one value will be selected. But if you mention the size is equal to 3 or size is equal to 4, it will display a list like this where 3 values will be displayed. So that is the use of a size attribute. The multiple attribute allows the user to select more than one value. So when you give an attribute which is multiple, so in the drop down list you can select only one value. But in the list like this where you are displaying 3 values, due to the size is equal to 3, you can select multiple attributes. You can select this and control and select this as well. So you can select multiple options together when you give multiple as an attribute. We write it. So select ID is equal to cars, name is equal to cars and size is equal to 3. So we mention the size and we are writing it with the select tag. And then you can mention the option values over there as well. This is for the size, that you write select tag and you mention the size. But when you have to write it for the multiple, it will be select tag and it will be multiple. You can combine multiple and size together as well. We'll be seeing the demo of all these tags in my next video where I'll be giving you a proper detailed explanation of all the tags working and with all the attributes as well. Do wait and watch for my next video to come up. So the next we have is a text area element. Elements define a multi-line input field, that is a text with an area. That's why it's written as multi-line input field. The rows attribute specifies the visible number of lines in a text area. The format of writing the text area element is text area. If you want to give a name for your text area, of writing the text area, this name is equal to any name that you want to give for your text area box. Rows is equal to 10 and columns is equal to 30. So it will be showing us a box with these many rows with height and column as a width. So it's going to take rows as the height and columns as the width. And inside the text area, this text will be visible. The cat was playing in the garden. So the output of this is a box where you can see the text is having the cat was playing in the garden, and the text area box is of the height to row 10 and the columns with the width as 30. And you can see there is this dots line which says you can extend the text area text if you want to. So if you keep entering the value and the value crosses this box, there will be a scroll bar that will be appearing which will give you the permission that you can scroll up and down as well. So that's about text area. We already learned about input tag. With input tag, we have numerous type tag, that is radio button, checkboxes, text, button. There are more into it. So HTML input types. There is a type which is called as password, where password defines a password field. As we know, whenever we enter any username and a password, it always comes in an asterisk format. So if we give input type is equal to password, it will come as an asterisk or it will come as a bulleted dot. So it won't be visible. That's the use of using input type is equal to password. When you give input type is equal to reset, it is a button that will be placed on your screen with the name as reset return on it. When you give input type is equal to reset, it will show you a button which is displayed with a reset name on it. So the value of that button is reset. So whenever you click on it, so any data that you have entered in your form will be erased. So reset does the work of resetting it to the original. Input type is equal to color, used for input fields that should contain a color. So if you want a color to be coming in the background, then you need to write input type is equal to color. If we give input type is equal to color, user for input field that should contain a color. So onto the text box, whenever we have entered anything into the text box, you can see the background is always white in the text box. But if you want any specific color to be given, then you can do this into the input box. A specific color will come up in the background, and once you have entered the value, you can change the background as well. So that is with the input type is equal to color. There's an input type is equal to date, which helps you to show a date picker on the screen. So you will get a small text box where it will be showing MMDDY1. You can click on it and a palette will open for the date and the specific month and all. So you can select from that. There it becomes very easy to select a date. Otherwise, you'll have to mention which format the date to be entered. So you can take the data properly from the form. Input type is equal to file. Defines a file selected field and a browse button for the upload file. So it is for helping us to browse and add a file into our page. So in that case, we'll be using input type is equal to file. Input type is equal to number defines a numeric input field. So if you give input type is equal to number, it will take only numbers. No alphabets, no alphanumeric characters will be inserted. When you give input type is equal to text, it takes all the combination that is possible. So if you want only the numbers to come in, then you need to give input type is equal to number. For input type, we have input attributes as well. So the attribute is value, which specifies an initial value for an input field. Attributes that work with the following is input type is text. So you need to give value for your text box that you give. As I had said already, that when you give a name, it's very helpful to capture the value for the text, because onto your page, you might have more than one text boxes. So how will you know when you're just giving input type is equal to text? So if you give a name as like txt1, txt2 or f name, l name, you can identify that the first box was named as f name, the second box was named as l name, or txt1 or txt2. So you can remember it. But when you give only input type is equal to text, no name to it, and you try to capture the value, all the text box values will be captured together. So there will be a jumble of values. So in that case, this value attribute plays an important place over there. Then we have read only, specifies that the input field is read only, cannot be modified. As we know, every file has an option of read only. So we can only read, we cannot edit that file. So same as the perspective over here. When you give input type is equal to something and you give as read only, it will only be visible. You can't edit, you can't delete, you cannot do any changes. The attribute that you can use is disabled. When you use disabled, a input field is unusable and unclickable. That means you cannot use it or you cannot click on that particular thing. Same way is the size. If you give the attribute size, it gives you the character field in the form of a size. If you give size, it will tell you what is the visible width of the size. So by default, input type is equal to text. The default size is 20. But if you want your text should at least take 25 or 30, then you need to mention size is equal to. Then it will take that much size and the text box will be of that much width. Because whenever you write input type is equal to text, it will have a specific way of displaying. If you want to alter the height and the width, though height cannot be altered because it's a text box. If you alter the height, then there will be no difference between a text box and a text area. But you can increase the width of it. So that will allow you to enter as many values as per. It will allow you to enter as many values as you have mentioned the size. Attribute. Work with what all input types, that is text, search, telephone number, URL, email and password. These input types you can use the attribute as size. You have max length, maximum number of characters allowed in an input field. So you can mention the number of length. So for example, you say enter 3-digit number. So if you want the 3 only to be entered, not a 4-digit, then you can mention max length is equal to 3. So in that text box, they will not enter more than 3 value. Our attribute continues. So we have min and a max, which specifies the minimum and the maximum value for an input field. So if you have a text box where you are trying to take a number or you are trying to take a range where the value should go in that case you can mention the minimum and the maximum. Then we already saw how to use a multiple in the select box. We can use multiples also when we are inserting input type. That is not only one email ID or any file, you can attach as much as possible so that you can take more and more input onto your page. So that is possible with the help of an attribute which is called as multiple. Next is the required, which specifies an input field must be filled out before submitting the form. So this required field can be given for any field which you feel is a mandatory field. To fill any registration form for any event, to book a ticket where you're putting in your details about it, there are some fees which are mandatory to be filled. So they give a required as an asterisk red color, which tells us that it is compulsory to be filled. So in that case, you can use required as an attribute. So without filling that particular column, your data will not be going ahead. So that's how is the use of a required field. All attributes go with the input tag. So thank you for watching. Hope you liked my video. Please do hit the like button and do share it with your friends and families. Do subscribe to my channel and don't forget to hit the bell button so that you don't miss out on any notification coming out from my channel. As I'll be putting up the next video which will be a demo of all the input tags and all the form tags that we have learned. So don't miss it. Subscribe to my channel and hit on the bell button. Thank you.